Welcome back to Cheddar's Opening Bell. The Right Side Political Action Committee is a group of Republicans trying to unseat President Trump and elect Joe Biden in November. For more on this, we're joined by Anthony Scaramucci, part of the Right Side PAC, a former White House communications director under President Trump and the founder of Skybridge Capital. Anthony, it's good to have you with me this morning. Why is Joe Biden a better option for Republicans than President Trump?
Well, I mean, listen, the schism in the Republican Party is worse now than it was with Ronald Reagan and Jerry Ford back in 1976. And so there's many of us that actually don't think President Trump is acting like a Republican. If you look at the deficit spending, the disavow of the allies, and you look at the context of how he's running the presidency, it's actually way less Republican than Joe Biden. As an example, during the back half of the Obama administration, they were reducing the deficit. If you just think about the way the president is recklessly spending and recklessly going after the Western democracies while he's praising people like President Putin, and you've heard no response from President Trump related to the bounty issue, there are so many reasons why he actually isn't a Republican. But that doesn't matter. He has Republican support, at least those that identify as Republicans. And our goal is to just take off sort of 5 to 7% of his support in certain precincts in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And if we can do that, he'll lose the election, and hopefully we'll create an opportunity to sort of restage the Republican Party. The Republican Party, if it's going to survive and not become a minority party, it needs to open up its tent demographically. And so you can't do that with President Trump. And so that's the reason why we're on this. And I think it'd be very, very damaging to have another 4 years of this nonsense.
How are you going about achieving that goal, Anthony?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's fundraising. There'll be a deployment of ads similar to what the Lincoln Project is doing. But it's really, for us, it's going to be a grassroots effort in Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Those 4 states, to the extent that we can, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, and we'll have to see where things are in September or October, but we intend to be campaigning in those precincts, in those areas of the country where the president may have had some support and people are wavering. As I said, if we can tip 5 to 7% of those people, it'll be mission accomplished.
And Joe Biden telling donors earlier this week that he does anticipate to raise taxes, that his donors might not like to hear that. Do you think that that would be the right move by Joe Biden?
Well, I think he's saying that. I think it's going to be very hard to raise taxes right now. If you remember the first part of the Obama administration, it took 3.5 years to really get a tax increase. I think what Vice President Biden is saying, though, is if you're going to be spending $3, $5, $7 trillion to try to dig us out of the hole that we're currently in, at some point we're going to have to reconcile that from a tax perspective. And so, a lot of us feel that deficit spending is frankly unfunded tax liability. There are modern monetary theorists out there that think that you can just print the money and it's not that big of a deal. But when you really study it, you look at 100 years of data, this type of deficit spending actually erodes working class families' income, erodes middle income, if you will, middle class families' real wages. So we have to really be careful about that. So yes, at some point, there will have to be a tax increase. It'll be a Republican president or a Democratic president that will have to tell the American people the truth about taxes. I don't think we can spend $5 to $7 trillion a year in deficit spending forever.
Okay, let's talk about the economy here. It is the one area where President Trump has a leg up on former Vice President Joe Biden in the polls. We know Trump overall has been slipping in the polls, and overall Biden is actually leading. But people do still think that Trump does better when it comes to the economy. Do you agree with that? And what does Biden need to craft about his message to show that he can be strong on the economy?
Well, no, listen, I agree. The polls are the polls. And so the data is like what Bill Parcells said about football. The record is the record. And so if people do feel that way, I think that and I can understand why they feel that way. There was good economic data prior to the pandemic. But the problem with President Trump is not just it's not necessarily economically related. It's more to do with the way he's managing the executive branch. There were cabinet members that came to see me, former cabinet members in October of 2019, came to my office at Skybridge and said, he's not managing this properly. If we get into a crisis, it'll be a full-blown catastrophe because the executive branch is not ready to handle this sort of a crisis. So when you think about managing the economy, people should step back and think about how he managed this pandemic, because had we had handled it the way South Korea handled it, or even the way Western Europe handled it, we'd be well ahead of it today, and the economy would be up on an upward trajectory. So I think people need to be holistic about how they think about President Trump with the economy. It's the crisis plus the economy. He didn't handle the crisis well. It had a massive impact on the economy.
Okay, it's been interesting, Anthony, over the past week or so, I've been hearing that people think President Trump would be in a better position today in the polls if he had stuck with Bannon and really catered the message to his base versus relying on Mnuchin and Jared Kushner to appease Wall Street, which many have said has caused him to slip in the polls because of that focus on Wall Street versus the base. Do you agree?
Well, I obviously don't agree. I mean, Steve Bannon wants to take the United States back to the 1890s, where it was literally an isolationist country, literally and figuratively walled off from the rest of society. An America first strategy that's propagated by somebody like Steve Bannon is against the interests of the United States long term. That becomes an America alone strategy. It's almost like if Charles Lindbergh and Joe McCarthy had a baby, it would be Steve Bannon. And so I think one of the singular historic accomplishments of my life is that as my suicide vest was going off inside the White House, I was able to reach for Steve Bannon and blow him out into Pennsylvania Avenue. He's a systemic danger to our society, and that would have been a further catastrophe for the United States, the world, and President Trump. So no, I actually disagree with that. If I came across too subtly, I apologize, but I strongly disagree with that.
No subtlety there, Anthony. Quickly, before we have to let you go, I do want to ask you about the jobs report. 4.8 million jobs added in the month of June. What are your projections for how long this recovery is going to take?
So I'm optimistic about the recovery because I do think there's a tremendous amount of stimulus has been put in place. Those job numbers were easily predicted because of what happened last time. And I think we're well on the way to, if it's not quite a V-shaped recovery, it's in between a U and a V. And I think that you'll see by the first or second half, I would say the first quarter to the second quarter of 2021, you'll see GDP prints that look similar to 2019. So I like the trajectory of the economy. The stimulus is helping. We give a lot of credit to Secretary Mnuchin for that, and to Larry Kudlow. And listen, a Biden administration that takes over that economic plan, it's the same way the Obama administration did with President Bush. They'll take many elements of that economic plan and carry it over to help further the recovery.
Interesting. All right, Anthony Scaramucci, we got to leave it there. He's the former White House Communications Director.
Happy 4th of July.
It's good to see you as well. I hope you enjoy your 4th of July holiday celebrations, probably wherever you are quarantining.
Yeah, I'm sitting out here in Southampton. I can't figure out what's on the wallpaper, so don't ask. I have no idea what that is.
Looks very Hamptons-esque, Anthony. Enjoy your holiday weekend. Anthony's also the founder of Skybridge Capital and the SALT Conference.